there, and thank you for joining me. This clip gives you a step-by-step guide for how I create EA design principles. So the EA design principles are statements that put boundaries around your design. The goal is to create one clear direction for the organization that's been endorsed by your full senior executive team. Having clear design principles will enable you to focus your innovation and design efforts around areas that the senior executives are in support of. Yes, you can find all sorts of EA principles on the web, but if you look at them, they are all very IT focused, and quite frankly, I find them to be very generic and kind of common sense. The design principles I'm talking about are customized to your organization and senior executive team. You're not just pulling them out of thin air. You are creating them based on what your executive team wants to do and how your organization currently looks and where it wants to go. This really is, I think this really is probably the hardest area to do and the area that you have to get right. So I always start with casual meetings with each of these senior executives. I like to introduce myself and get a sense of who they are with respect to their position. I'm trying to understand what they're concerned about, what is important to them, what they deem or determine as critical, what they're frustrated with, and really any of their thoughts or ideas of how things should look. I also like to understand how much they know about transformation and architecture in general. And are they comfortable with IT, technology, or not? Another big part of this is for me to find my allies. I'm looking for individuals who are leaders willing to champion what we're about to do. And then I need to identify the individuals that I'm going to have to win over or understand if they're going to be putting roadblocks up throughout this whole process. So like I said in the introduction, I've created a fictitious organization so that I can give examples throughout this course. And in the end, we will create the consolidated roadmap for this organization. So referring to the supporting documentation included within this section of the course, by reading this, you'll get a high-level understanding of our fictitious organization. And you're gonna be able to read the types of things I would capture during these interviews. So I'm not going to go into detail of exactly what's in this document. You're going to have to read along and follow as you go through this clip. But basically, you need to understand what this organization is all about to get going. So once I get a sense from the senior executives, I start looking for my team. Now, remember at this point, you really don't have that official EA team. Or maybe you do, which gives you a bit of a head start. But regardless, what I'm looking for are the people within the organization that can help me. The people that can influence change. The people that know how the organization ticks. So the purpose of this team is to help create that picture of that one clear direction of where we're going. So using that team that I pulled together, and again, they do not have to be architects, and that team does have to represent both your business, your security, your technical, your information, different aspects of the organization. So using that team, I hold a number of what I'm calling brainstorming sessions. So my goal, like I said, is to paint that clear picture of what the senior executives want from a perspective of what is on the table and what is off. I want to make sure that I understand what the executive's appetite for change is. So are they looking at changing everything, or do they just want to bring a few efficiencies? Is this a big transformation, or are we just going to modernize things and focus in certain areas? So this might seem strange, but my first question to the team is always, what is our business? So what I've learned from my past is quite often as organizations grow and staff turns over, things morph. So the goal of this question is to really understand what the business is and what brings value to our clients. So going back to the team that I've brought together, I need people that know the organization, people that can give me a bit of background, a bit of history on the organization, as well people who are really in tune with what's going on. I need people that can think outside the box and connect the dots, because we need to come up with exactly what the business is. So going back to that fictitious organization, again, stop the video, take a few minutes to read those first few sections of the document. But how I would summarize it is our fictitious organization really is made up of two services. Our business is to provide financial benefits to citizens, and our business is to provide home care consultation to citizens who need it, citizens that have just had surgery. So once we establish what the business is, the next task is to challenge that. So are we doing anything that is not our business? And if so, should we be doing it? At the same time, is there anything that we're not doing that maybe we should be doing? We need to challenge things that isn't our business, things that may have morphed over the years, and things that may be missing. So using our fictitious organization again, one thing that jumps out at me is we have two teams within the financial department. One that works with citizens that report to the revenue agency, and one who works with the citizens that don't report to the agency. So my first thought is our business isn't to determine income. That is the revenue agency's job. So why are we doing it? Well, the history behind it is when we were a smaller organization, it was very easy for us to follow through every application. And it just morphed into something bigger over the years. So let's look at what I mean when I say let's challenge it. So anytime you're about to challenge something, you're opening up a difficult conversation. So I want to say that these discussions within your team and even with the senior executive are not going to be easy ones. At this point, you really can't worry about stepping on toes, because your job is to help the senior executives reach the best outcome for the organization. You need to ask questions and you need to have those hard conversations. It's the only way you're going to understand what the executives are willing to change and what they're not willing to change. So what I try to do is I stay very fact-based. I stay away from any kind of blaming, and I tend to ask a lot of questions and make little suggestions. So I might approach the executives with something like, what we have observed is there are areas that we believe are no longer bringing business value. So when the organization was smaller, it was easy for us to follow up on every single application and work with the citizens to determine their income. Now that we have grown and we're serving a greater population, we are wondering if it makes sense to go that extra mile. So what I like to do is I introduce what's been observed, sort of what the team has talked about. Then I introduce a bit of the background. For example, one area in particular has to do with how we determine the citizens applying for financial aid's income. Income is determined by what is reported to the revenue agency. And yet we have dedicated a full team that determines income that has not been reported to the revenue agency. So then I like to pose a direct question, because I want to challenge this. So the question to the executives could be, do we create a design for our future that continues to have a team dedicated to determining income that has not been reported, or do we possibly remove that team that has been dedicated to this activity? So remember, that doesn't mean that these people on the team are gone. It could mean that these people are repurposed to do something that brings more business value. And an added benefit in doing something like this is going to start to force your citizens wanting financial aid to report their income, which is all the greater good for government on a whole, of which we are a government agency. So that's what I mean by challenging it. That's the types of questions that I would ask. And it really is, do we create a design for the future that includes this team? If not, maybe we repurpose the team for greater business value. And they tend to listen to this and think about it, and they start discussions. So then what I do is, once I kind of put that on the table, I paint the picture of status quo, so if our future design includes a team, and then I try and think of something way outside on different that doesn't include it at all. So I might present something like this and say, I want to talk about the two extremes. So the first is status quo, where we continue with the determined income not reported team. And the second is, let's swing the pendulum all the way and we remove that team. So again, remind them, just because we're talking about it doesn't mean that this is what we're gonna do. We want to get some discussions going, and we want to look at the pros and cons if we were to do it. So if our future design includes the team, as is, a pro could be that our citizens seem to really appreciate this, but the con on the other side is we're performing activities that don't bring any business value. And in fact, as our population grows, so does our workload, which means we're going to have to put more resources in this area to deal with it. If we were to create a future design that doesn't include the team, a pro could be we could repurpose that team to attract more citizens. Because if you look at the interviews we had with the executives, they went on and on about they want to reach more citizens and they want to help more citizens. So maybe our team gets repurposed to that area. Another thing we could do is possibly that team isn't determining income, but it's helping the citizens report their income, because maybe they don't know that how to report them. That wouldn't be helping us directly, but it does help government on a whole. So the con is the citizens who may really need the help may not get the funds as quickly as possible, because if you are now telling them that they have to go report before they can even come for help, that could take some time. But again, our designs would be aware of this, and what we could do is we could build a transition step in there to accommodate this. But it's a knowing how far we want to take it, and then what are the executives concerned about. Once we kind of put that on the table, I do it quite fast. I don't let them to get into a lot of discussions, because I'm just trying to swing that pendulum both ways and give them things to think about. Then what I do is I encourage them to start discussing it. I try and stay out of all the conversations. I will answer questions if they ask, and I try and keep it on track and let them talk for about 10 to 15 minutes, and the goal is to get a consensus of where they're willing to land on the pendulum. Are they going to stay completely status quo? Are they going to be adventurous and go all the way to the outside? Or do they want to land somewhere in the middle? Maybe the team just gets smaller and it does a little bit less. That is for the executives to decide, not for you. So the next area I like to think about where I want to challenge is the systems. And systems here refers to both your processes and your applications. Don't think of systems just as technology. So what I'm looking for are areas where we are reinventing the wheel. So going back to that fictitious organization, the first thing that jumps out at me is, why do we have a great big customized payment system? There are many industry best practices in this space. Similar, the scheduling system. Like, why have we created something so custom to schedule appointments? The certification process is another interesting one. So who are we to certify that they are eligible to work as nurses and doctors? Maybe, we should have caught that one when we were looking at what is our business. That's not the important thing here. The important thing is to catch it, to discuss it, and is it something that we want to create a presentation slide for the executives? So once we kind of identify those systems, so we came up with 3, let's start challenging those. So the goal is not to challenge everything. Like, we don't want to put everything in front of the executives because we don't want these meetings going on everywhere. We're trying to come up with what are the executives' appetite for change, and B, our design principles. So we're looking for things to challenge that are unique, and we'll get some discussions going. So with respect to our fictitious organization, I would challenge the payment system. And I chose this and not do the scheduling system. And I chose it over the scheduling system because the payment system, from all of our discussions with the team, I have learned that it is a big, complex application. I know a lot of money has gone into hiring consultants to keep it working. If they're willing to change this, there's a good bet that they're willing to change the scheduling system from a design perspective. And if they're not willing to change this big payment system because they've just invested a lot of money and time into it, then if the pendulum sort of lands status quo, then I might bring up that scheduling system because maybe they would have an appetite to look at that. And even if you just get one of them into a COTS product or industry best practices, it's going to save some efficiencies. So, and I would also challenge the certification process. And the reason I chose to do that is because it goes back to who's the source of truth. So who is it for us to say that someone is a nurse or a doctor and able to work in that field? That's not our call. Again, we're trying to create these design principles. So here's how I might present the information to the executives. So I'd start with what we observed. So understanding that our business is to calculate financial aid payment, what we observed is we spend a lot of money and time maintaining a separate payment system. Oh, sorry. And I'm going to go on to explain that there's many applications available in this space that could save us a lot of headaches and costs if we were to possibly adopt one for the future. Then I would get into introducing a bit of background. So what we understand is when our system was created, the calculations and payments were small and simple. But as government legislation has changed over the years, we were forced to grandfather a lot of calculations into our systems. And over the years, it's become very, very complex and hard to maintain and manage. Not to mention that the only people capable of maintaining the systems are now external consultants. They no longer work for the organization. For us to find them and bring them in to maintain the system or to make a change is very, very expensive and very risky. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring this one forward, because it is going to go back to that whole prioritization of risk and liability. So then I want to pose this direct question. I want to start those discussions. You got to remember your senior executives in the room. You've got people representing finance, right? Your CFO is probably in there. You've got people representing the business, technology. You've probably got someone in there representing HR. Each one of these is going to come at this from a completely different angle of what they're trying to do and protect their space. So these discussions truly are, you're posing challenges to them, and you're leaving it up to them with the CEO to come down on the consensus and give the final word. So do we continue, the question could be to them, do we continue as is with a big custom complex payment application in our future, or do we look at replacing it with sort of an off-the-shelf COTS product and start to adjust our business processes to work with it? At the same time, we can repurpose those resources that maintain that payment application to something that brings more business value. So similar to that last discussion, I want to paint that picture with that pendulum and really start to talk to them about what the future would look like if we don't do anything, or what the future would look like if we look at something that is very different. So status quo would be, continuing to design this custom payment system into our future. It would increase our costs and risk to find the consultants that can maintain it, that are still well versed in this technology. And you got to remember, every year it gets harder and harder as people start to retire and as your technology gets older. Or are we creating a design that moves us into a world where we're starting to adopt industry standards and best practices and possibly buy COTS products for areas and functionality that's really not our domain of expertise? I also just, for this fictitious organization, would challenge the certification system. So I want to challenge where we are determining if this nurse or this doctor should be on our healthcare team. So I might start by pointing out the source of truth. So as you're aware, the colleges, the educational institutions, are the source of truth for nurses and doctors. They are aware if a license is pulled due to something that they've done. They're aware right away. We might not find out about it ever or years later, and here we have a practitioner that we have deemed as certifiable that really isn't. So I got to pose that, because that comes back to thinking about our risks and our liabilities. So my question leading to the discussion might be, should we be maintaining this registry and certifying the practitioners, or should we be designing a future that relies on the educational institutions to do this for us? The benefit of this future is that we will be notified as soon as a license is pulled. So put that question in front of them. Fill out your pros and cons, whatever your team can help you come up with. This is why you want a team that really knows the organization and how it ticks, because they can help you pull things that you've heard senior executives talk about. Like, we want to pinpoint, again, their appetite for change. We want to help them identify, risks and liabilities and how we can help them in the future. So does our design look very similar today when it comes to how we certify practitioners, or does it start to look very different where we're going to rely on the source of truth? Again, we're not talking about how it's being done or when it's being done. We're talking about, do they have the appetite to do this? So next, I like to tackle strategies. So all those strategies, visions, rumors around the organization that you're hearing. Start by creating a list of the strategic areas of change. Again, this is why you have your team there for the brainstorming sessions. Anything that they've kind of heard of, or the rumors, create that list just off the top of their head. Don't spend a lot of time going out there researching. Off the top of the head, what are the strategic areas of change? Next, identify what we think they mean. And I have to say that everybody's going to interpret them a little different, which leads to a lot of anxiety and your cultural change issues. People take their past experience, their current roles within the organization, and they start to make all sorts of assumptions of what is happening and what it should happen. Our goal here is to get the team on the same page about what those strategies mean and what the future looks like. We're not designing, but we're just trying to get an idea, again, of the executive's appetite for change. Are we thinking the same things the executives are thinking? If we are not, let's catch it sooner than later, because we want design principles that are going to help us create our designs and our innovations. So going back to our fictitious organization, we came up with the following strategic areas. And now we need to understand if we have the same meaning as the executives. So I might create a presentation slide for the executives. So here's an example of the self-service. So there are a number of strategic moves this organization is planning to make, and we want to make sure that we have the same understanding of how they will impact the business as you do. So starting with the self-service, we believe the intent is to provide services online, making them easier for the citizens to help themselves. This also means educating them on the process and where they are in the process. That's what we think the definition of it is. Then the way I might lead into the discussion with the senior executives is currently, so here we kind of want to look at our status quo. Our representatives take weeks to learn the processes, including all of the steps and rules, so that they can take the citizens' applications and process them for them. There are a few things that citizens currently are doing online, and I might point them out or I might not, but that's what we're doing today. In the future, does this self-service mean that we want to think about putting 100% of our services online and as self-service? If we do that, what that means is everything would have to be broken down into very small components so that we can educate the citizens before they do it. We want to, enable them to be able to learn all the rules and understand all the implications for their applications. Sorry, let's go back to that. So if you start to lay this on the table, again, you get them discussing what this really means. And where we want to land on those two extremes is somewhere in the middle. It really doesn't make sense to have every single thing self-service. So what you want the executives to start to point out is what are the areas that they're not willing to put as self-service. And that's what we're getting at here. We want to start to identify if they're willing to put everything on as a very different design than if there's just some areas that they don't have the appetite to change. We're looking for their appetite to put services online and create self-service. And then the last area I like to really look at is I want to assess those executive interviews. I want to take everything I heard and try and come into one clear direction that's endorsed by all of them. I want to tease out what I heard from each of them, and I want to pull them and interpret them all together. Again, this does go back to really understanding, is this a big transformation or are we just looking for efficiencies and modernization? And you know what? Some of the executives might be looking just for a little bit of tweaking, and others might be looking for great big transformations. Bringing them into the table like this with your CEO, the one that's in charge, now we can get them on the same plate as, what we really want to do as a whole. Those mixed messages coming down from the senior executives across the organization create a lot of your cultural change issues, create a lot of the noise, create a lot of the anxiety. This is your chance to really help them lock down one clear vision and really understanding what each of those strategic moves mean, which each of the areas that are, they have the appetite to change or they don't have the appetite to change. This meeting is, to get all these answers, is crucial. So now keep in mind our goal is to create those EA design principles and to find their appetite for change. So let's paint a pictures to see how these executives respond. So again, we're going for that pendulum scenario. We want to drive the executives to a consensus of where they want to land on the scale. A, doing nothing, B, great big changes. So I always like to go really big and give them some ideas of what it could look like. And it really gets those conversations going. I've had more compliments after this type of a discussion than I've ever had anywhere in my full 30-year career. This gets the juices flowing. This gets them really thinking about what they've been saying when, in all their strategies and what their intention really is. So here's what I would present. So what I kept hearing during all the interviews was, we want to help and we want to reach all the citizens, make their lives easier, bring efficiency, save money. So what if we approached the citizens and providers? What if every single citizen is in our system based on vital stats? That is the source of truth. And when income falls below a certain level, maybe we reach out income that falls below a certain level based on what is being reported to Revenue Canada, or sorry, Revenue Agency. Maybe we reach out and we start talking to them. Maybe if it reaches a certain threshold, we go out and we start to consult them that, you know, they're coming low, and we give them different ideas of how they can increase their revenue so they don't get trapped down into needing that financial aid. There's so many things that, you know, a government agency could offer to help the citizens not fall down into that area where they need financial aid. And, you know, a lot of times citizens don't know, and they don't know where to go for help. Then maybe once they hit that certain level, we just start automatically offering them financial aid. We don't have to have them report their income because we already have that through the Revenue Agency. What's another one? What if we reach out because they're not reporting income? You know, that's another issue that we have. So here we want to start to capture those people that aren't reporting. Maybe they're not reporting because they don't know how to, or they don't know that they have to. Well, here we could start flagging them, and now again we reach out, and our job is more of a consultation to help inform them about what the Revenue Agency is and how you report it and things like that. So we really start to flip our whole operational model, but we're still doing what we thought we heard the executive say. And we want to find out if we're interpreting what they're saying. So then I also want to look at the other service, which is your home care. So again, keep in mind, we're looking for EA design principles, and we're looking for the appetite of change, and we don't want to leave out certain areas. So what if we approach citizens and providers in this space as well? So my first thinking is, how do we know that they need the home care consultation? Well, if you read about the organization, what it says is, and again, I used a very simple one so that we could talk about it in a reasonable amount of time, but it was basically, we're looking at home care consultation for anybody that has surgery. Okay, so how do we know people have had surgeries? What if we're now working with the hospitals and we're getting a report when surgeries happen, and we know exactly the type of consultation or home care help that they're going to need. The other thing is, you know, our providers. We're creating that healthcare team. Well, maybe we shouldn't be the ones doing it anymore. Maybe we're looking at what the hospital has reported, and that's who we use, and we go to the College of Physicians and Surgeons. So, you know, by putting something like this on the table, again, we've swung the pendulum to see, are they interested in this? So what I'm getting at here is, who is the source of truth behind this information? Should we be going after it, and do the executives have an appetite to do it? Doesn't mean we're gonna do it right away. It doesn't mean that these organizations can even give it to us, but it starts the conversations, and maybe, you know, there's a win-win for both sides. For example, with the hospitals and the surgeries, if they know that we're coming in right after them to do the care, maybe they don't have the same kind of follow-up later on. So they want the reports going both ways. Like, you have to think of that full picture. And again, it's all about asking questions and challenging what's going on today. It's not about creating the design and making any decisions. It's looking for the appetite of change. So that's the last thing I would present to them, is I would throw this scenario out. You know, the way that I think, and based on all the interviews I heard, and based on all of the discussions and brainstorming sessions we had, I go and I look at what is our core business. So we came up with those two services, and then what are the source of truth and how do we get the information? I'm gonna leave it at that. That gives you a really good idea of it. So what I do is, so we talked about each of those 4 areas, and each of those areas could result in multiple presentation slides. We're looking for the top 6 or so, the areas where we really want to understand the executive's appetite. And again, you're thinking about the types of principles that you want to create. So you pulled out that certification, which was really looking at going after the source of truth. Don't pull another one that's going to prove that same thing about the source of truth, or the appetite for going to the source of truth, because you don't have enough time with the executives to go through all of them. Find very unique areas that you want to do. So for the meetings, each one of those, I do a little bit of that description, and then I want about a 15-minute discussion. So really, I'll hold 3 to 4, present 3 to 4 of those issues per meeting. That's about all you can get, like a 2 to 3 hour window with the executives. So then what I'll do is I'll break it apart and I'll pull it across a couple of meetings. When you do it that way, then you can put some of those meetings on the table. For example, what is our business? So you can really understand what that business is before you go and create that last presentation of what you're going after for Utopia. So really think about it, engage what you're going to present when. Sometimes your second meeting is going to depend on some of the answers from your first meeting, but you do not want to waste their time. You do want to get them really engaged and discussing this and coming to a consensus rate in there, because you're not going to get back in there on that same topic. So what I do is right at the beginning, you've got to start to book this, because it's hard to get blocks of time with the full senior executive. So how I approach the meeting is I set aside about a 30-minute per topic. Usually I go for 2 half-day sessions. I start with the intro explaining what we're going to do. I make it clear that just because I am showing them Utopia doesn't mean that we're going to do it or we're going to design to it. It is to get those discussions flowing and to show kind of the art of the possible. The goal is to come to a consensus between, somewhere in the middle of what we're discussing. Then I will tackle that first topic. So I showed you the slides of how I do it. I describe the status quo, I describe Utopia, and then I kind of describe the pros and cons on each, and I sit back and I get those discussions flowing. And then I have to land on the scale at the end of each. So I like to go back and say that, are we in agreement that this is roughly what we want to design towards? And if you've got some arguments in the room, it is the CEO or the number one, the president, whatever their title is, that is going to help you land on where you go. CFO is going to want to save money, IT is going to want the flashy new technology, and business is going to want their citizens happy, HR is going to want their staff happy. You can't please everybody, but you gotta figure out where you're gonna flow. So after your meeting, you should understand kind of all your core business areas that are up for change. You should kind of understand your systems that are up for change. You should understand what those strategic areas really mean. And you know what? You should have pretty much one clear direction of what it's gonna look like. So the next thing we want to do is, out of all that, we want to create EA design principles. So come back, work with your team, and create them. So starting with the first slide, we were challenging the department that was there helping the citizens determine their income. So let's say that the executives were in favor of removing the team. So then we start to think about what kind of principles do we create to support that. Then continue with the remainder of the presentation slides. Keep in mind that you may create more than one principle per slide, and refer to the supporting documentation to sort of see the full list that I kind of brainstormed and came up with. Once we come together and we have all those design principles, I like to pull them together, summarize the meeting in an email, and get it back to the participants. Ask for people to come forward if you've missed anything or they want to add something. You know, this should take about a month to get through, mainly because it's just so hard to get in front of your executives. And you may want to have them watch clip number 9 and schedule a meeting as soon as possible so that they kind of get an idea of what's coming, what this is all about, and how it ties together. So if you have any questions, this is really hard describing this type of information without having someone here to ask questions as I'm going through it. I am more than happy to answer any questions, to try and explain things further, to bring more examples. I am gonna try and put as much information within the document as well as what I've talked about here. I absolutely love this and I could talk forever on it, but that should give you an idea of what I consider EA design principles and how I come up with them. So continue watching the next clip to understand how I identify and document our core business functions.